Innocent Boo would square off against his thin grey doppelganger, throwing a punch towards him. Evil Boo caught it easily before throwing a punch himself, sending Boo tumbling backwards against a wall. Good Boo would stand up, dusting himself off before rushing towards Evil Boo again. Before he could even reach Evil Boo, however, Piccolo would hit Evil Boo first, sending him to the ground with a kick. "You need to get out of here, Boo. I'll handle this." Boo would shake his head, refusing to give up. He could be pretty stubborn sometimes. "Boo, fight!" "Fine, I don't care what you do, but I don't need your help." Piccolo would block another strike from Evil Boo before headbutting him and throwing him to the ground. Before he could follow up, however, he'd have to let go and move, because Boo fired the candy beam at them. Both Piccolo and Evil Boo managed to avoid it. "If you aren't going to leave, you could at least be careful." "You be careful!" It was like talking to a child. Piccolo really didn't like this guy. Evil Boo would grab a hold of Innocent Boo's antenna, swinging him around and throwing him towards Piccolo, who just about managed to catch him. Evil Boo would keep up on the offensive with a volley of energy bullets. He was mainly targeting Good Boo, as he wasn't strong enough to hurt Piccolo really. Innocent Boo would lose his temper and try to turn Evil Boo into chocolate, but he'd blow the beam back at him, turning Good Boo into chocolate and eating him, creating Super Boo. They'd sensed this back on the lookout, which meant they could also sense Piccolo couldn't handle an opponent like this. Goku would decide to head into the fight, despite the fact he wasn't even strong enough to make a difference. Remember, in the original, Super Saiyan 3 wasn't strong enough to beat Super Boo, and Goku doesn't have Super Saiyan 3 here. Tarble would hang back for just a moment, going over to the time chamber to get 18. She wasn't happy to leave so early, but she didn't have much choice. They needed anyone at all who could fight right now. Still, she'd had a few months of training non-stop, using every second to its fullest. Kyo has nobody to train with for her remaining time, so Yamcha volunteers. Sure, she's way stronger than him, but he's a better fighter at least, so we could teach her a thing or two. Piccolo would try to punch Super Boo in the face, but he easily evaded the attack. Outstretching his arm, he'd wrap it around Piccolo before dragging him close and kneeing him in the stomach. He prepared an energy blast, but before he could fire, Goku would appear, grabbing Piccolo and teleporting him to safety. Well, relative safety. Boo was still around. "Boo, remember you? You aren't strong enough to challenge me. And you said you'd wait." "Boo, bored. This strong guy? Not strong enough. Someone even stronger is going to show up." "Boo, no, wait. Boo, fight." Since they didn't have much choice, they'd have to fight. Tarble and Android 18 would both show up as well. The four of them weren't strong enough to even touch Super Boo. Not really. But between them, they could keep him busy. 18 had grown much stronger in the time chamber. If this was still Fat Boo, she may have managed to match him. But like this, they were pretty much just scrambling to keep him busy. Super Boo would yawn, blocking a kick from 18 and throwing her into Goku. He'd dodge another blow from Piccolo, and Tarble would punch Boo square in the cheek, but he didn't even flinch. Or rather, Tarble's fist went straight through, but then his hand got stuck in Boo's cheek. Try as he might, he couldn't seem to pull himself free. The others would try to assist, but Boo would place his hand against Tarble's chest, firing a ki blast at him point blank. He'd land on the ground in a heap. It was difficult to even tell if he was alive. Goku wasn't really a factor in the fight, he simply wasn't strong enough. He has one idea that just might work, but it was an insane risk. This is something he'd been practicing. He doesn't have Super Saiyan 3 here, but he was working on something else. He'd never actually tried it, but in theory it should work. Combining Super Saiyan 2 with Kaioken. He'd explode towards Super Boo, elbowing him in the stomach. It hurt a little. Boo would try to grab a hold of him, but he'd have to block a kick from 18 as well as a punch from Piccolo. They'd keep this up for a while, and while Boo wasn't taking any damage, he was struggling somewhat to keep up with the three of them. Boo would go to reach out and grab 18 as she rushed in, but he'd find himself encased in a sphere of energy from Tarble. He'd slam his fist against the barrier, but he seemed unable to break it. Goku would try to capitalize on him seemingly being restrained for now. "Idiot." Boo smirked, but Piccolo's sensitive hearing picked it up. "Goku, it's a trick! He isn't actually trapped!" Boo would outstretch his hand, smashing through the barrier, catching Goku by the throat and firing a ki blast straight through his chest, killing him. Kaioken be damned he couldn't put a scratch on Boo. "It doesn't look like we can win this," 18 grimaced. "We don't need to. We just need to keep him busy for a few hours until Gohan gets here." "So it's not a bluff. You do have someone coming." Boo still wasn't willing to wait, but if Piccolo was able to get so much stronger, then who knew how strong Gohan could get? Maybe he should prepare for that situation. Boo would sink into a puddle of goo, slinking away, deciding to pick his target. He could absorb Piccolo, that'd be useful. But then there was a matter of 18 or Tarble. He wanted at least one person to toy with while he waited for Gohan. Eventually he chose 18 due to her infinite energy. 18 and Piccolo were both encased in the pink goo as they were absorbed by Super Boo. Back on the Supreme Kai's planet, they saw the situation deteriorating fast. No! Even with Gohan's potential unlocked, there's no way he could beat Majin Buu after absorbing those two." Elder Kai would protest, deciding that the only remaining option was the Potara earrings, so he'd tell Shin how they work and that they just needed someone who could use them. Gohan would suggest they contact Baba and ask her to bring back Goku, but unfortunately King Yama wasn't willing to let Goku go when he hadn't even been checked in yet. He was still in line. The fate of the universe is on the line, you idiot! Well then take Vegeta, he's already been checked in. Reluctantly, Baba would take Vegeta. Vegeta wasn't happy about having to fuse with someone, but he could sense that Buu had gotten a lot stronger. It was their only real choice. When they arrived, Shin would hold Buu in place with telekinesis for as long as he could. Unfortunately, there was no time for a sibling reunion, as Vegeta had to explain to Tarble how the Potara earrings worked, and the two of them would fuse into Vegetarble. Come on, you all knew this was coming. From episode 1, Vegetarble was gonna happen. Forget being named after vegetables, they are now a vegetable. And you would think of a better name for a Vegeta and Tarble fusion. Vegetarble would waste no time taking the offensive. He'd hold out his hand and a barrier of energy would form around Bukalo, restricting him from moving.
You can leave this to me, Supreme Kai. Get out of here.
Shin would teleport back to the Supreme Kai's planet, and then Vegetarble would clench his fist. The barrier would begin to condense around Buu, compressing him into a ball and then exploding. That would leave Buu badly injured, but he'd quickly recover. Bukalo would run forward, aiming to kick the fusion, who easily evaded the attack. He'd evade a flurry of blows from Buu before catching his arm and kicking him in the stomach. Before Buu could recover, he'd fire a blast into his stomach, blowing the Martian to bits. Once Buu had regenerated, he'd try again, rushing forward, stretching out his arm and wrapping it around Vegetarble. He'd land a few blows on his face, but it didn't do any damage at all. The fusion would manage to free his hand before jabbing 2 fingers into Buu's eyes, which forced him to let go. He'd follow that up with kicking Buu in the face, who'd retreat and begin charging the light grenade. He'd just destroy this planet and be done with it. They couldn't survive in space. However, just as he was about to fire the blast, another sphere of energy formed around him, so when Super Buu fired the attack, he was trapped inside with the energy, blowing himself apart again, though this time he wouldn't come back together immediately.
What's the matter? I know that wouldn't kill you. Why are you hiding?
A small piece of Buu would stick to the fusion's leg, followed by more, and then more. Buu was trying to absorb him. Just as the goo enveloped him, he'd create a barrier around himself. The two brothers defuse inside Buu's body, and as soon as they drop the barrier, they find Piccolo and 18 without too much trouble. They cut out both of them, and so Buu realizes what's going on. Or at least he realizes that something is wrong, so he does some introspection and looks within himself, just as Vegeta and Tarble find good Buu.
Should we free this one?
I don't really want to leave him here. He was making progress, and it would probably weaken Buu if we take him. Tarble wasn't really sure what to do with good Buu. Super Buu shows up and tries to fight them, but he hesitates when Vegeta grabs the pod containing good Buu. He begged for them not to rip it out, but Vegeta didn't listen and he'd rip good Buu out of Super Buu. Tarble grabbed 18 and Vegeta grabbed Piccolo, and they'd escape Buu's body just as it began to transform. And that's where I think I'll leave it for now. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this part. The name Vegetarble is kinda goofy, but Dragon Ball is goofy, so If you like this video, maybe leave a like or even subscribe. But that's all from me. Have a good day. Oh, and sorry for vanishing so long. It was nothing really. It was just my microphone broke, and my headphones broke, and my phone broke, and by the time I had everything ready to record, I was just struggling to write, because I hadn't done it in a while.